started. Good morning, everyone from Shanghai. If you're in this part of the world, in China and in Asia, good evening to the people in New York and on the East Coast. And if you're somewhere in the middle, then I hope you're having a good day. My name is Paul Lin. I'm an adjunct professor here in NYU Shanghai, and welcome. If you are returning, if you've been to our show before and seen our show, welcome back. If it's your first time, then welcome. We're part of NYU School of Professional Studies, the Integrated Marketing Communications Program, which is where I teach and the courses that I teach. And the webinar and the show is really, we call it Lessons from China. This is the 5th season. So we're kicking it off with Momo from IKEA China. But before we do that, just to give some background and some flavor, we created this as a way to sort of bridge the business divide between what's happening in China and what's happening in the West. There are a lot of students from this part of the world that attend, and and China's always in the news, right? In terms of business, in terms of innovation, in terms of technology. And what we want to do was to say, how do we sort of tell that story, and how do we take lessons from what's happening here to the rest of the world, right? And just sort of have that cross-cultural divide, because NYU is really all about building a community and the ability to share and learn and get insights from different parts of the world, right? There's a campus in the Middle East and other parts. And I think for us, really, it's how do we take what's happening in the biggest market and provide some lessons, some observations, and some great speakers that are doing amazing things on the ground here, and give it back to the community, whether you're in business, whether you're an academic, or whether you're a student. If you want to check out, if this is the first time, if you want to check out some of our past episodes, you could just go to YouTube, type in NYU and Lessons from China as keywords, and you'll pop up. We've had some great speakers from the largest VC backed firm here in China, the head of innovation from Shiseido, a lot of great speakers in the past that have come on to sort of give their angle and perspective on business in this part of the world. Okay. On that note, let me just introduce to you our speaker and our guest for today. His name is Momo. He is the head of digital experience at IKEA China. He is a close friend and a confidant and a fantastic business colleague that I've worked with probably for over the last 6 or 7 years. I've brought him into my classroom to speak on many occasions with my students. So if you're lucky enough to sort of be a part of that, then you could hear it from him. What I wanted to do today was really just bring him in and tell you what IKEA is doing, right? Because IKEA, furniture shopping behavior is very different in this part of the world. And IKEA, I think China is very unique as a sort of a market compared to globally. And I think it's important to really tell that story, okay, on that. Momo comes from a very extensive background. He'll sort of give some insights on how he's gone to IKEA. But on that note, let me just pass it over to Momo for you to kick it off. Oh, and sorry, one thing, if you have any questions, just please, again, we're all very familiar with Zoom over the last 3 years now, but just put them in the chat, and then we'll, as we go through this whole presentation at the end, I'll ask them, and then we could discuss them, okay? So on that note, I'll pass it over to you, Momo, to kick it off.
Fantastic, thank you, Paul, and thank you, NYU, for hosting this series. I think it's quite important and hopefully quite interesting as well. Maybe what I'll do, let me share my screen and then we can get started. So I've been using Zoom for a long time, so hopefully I shouldn't need to ask you this question, but Paul, let me know if you can see my screen. Yeah, awesome. Great. So hello, everyone. My name is Momo. I can tell you maybe a little bit about me and then explore a little bit more. Like, oh, let me center myself there. There you go. So my name is Momo. I've been in China for about 11 years. I am originally from Ecuador, a very different place. And back in the day, the reason why I stayed and what kept me here is just, I would say, incredible dimension of everything, right? The dimension, the size of the buildings, the size of the market, the size of the opportunities. But at the same time, the complexity of understanding what's going on, the complexity of integrating how we think, how we work, how we get things done into this environment. And those challenges were very, very interesting, very nurturing for my growth, my development. And at the same time, we're quite a great space, I think, for companies at the same time, right? To mature and tackle the challenges that we find here. If you're into social media, you can find me as UX Momo in most places. At the moment, I will share today as much as I can share. A lot of the content that I'm going to be sharing today, all of it is public knowledge, public domain about the work that we do in China. But what I would love to ask you to do is try and look beyond maybe some of this content that relates to IKEA and try to see what's maybe the system, like what are maybe the learnings or the things that you can bring to your own context. Hopefully, if you maybe are part of a multinational company, or you're a startup, or you're more curious about entering or understanding China, hopefully you will see some interesting pointers here that will guide you. If you're a student and you're curious of understanding how companies like IKEA work and what's the role you can play in it, there's probably something for you as well in here. And as our dear hosts said, if you have any questions, I think you can submit them, and some of those will be able to be answered later in the session. So let's get started. So I work at the China Digital Hub. It's a relatively young part of the China organization. We've been around for about 4 years now. And of course, because we are such a young part of the organization, that alone brought a lot of challenges. We were a lot of, I would say, new kids on the block with shiny new laptops and, brand new business cards. And we were trying to figure out how do we integrate ourselves? How do we work on this environment that has already been around, for quite a long time? What's the role that we play in it, and how do we understand each other to work together? And that, in a way, if you zoom out, that's literally what coming into China feels like, right? It feels like you bring so much newness into this context. And one of the first things that you need to figure out as you enter a market like this is what's the role that you want to play in it, and how maybe unequipped are you to deal with what's happening. In our case at IKEA in the Digital Hub, our main focus is omnichannel. And of course, omnichannel can have a lot of definitions. I mean, it can be quite a big definition, or it can be quite straightforward and simple. The short version of what omnichannel is, right, for retail, is about integrating different channels that market, sell, and serve, but in a way that creates a cohesive customer experience. To give you maybe one of the many models to visualize this is our take on it. So if you imagine a customer journey, whichever many steps it may have. The idea of omnichannel as a business model, as an experience for customers, simply means that there are channels that very seamlessly hand off, that relationship we have with our clients, different parts of the journey, but in a way that is very seamless. You almost don't notice that now you are in a channel that is selling. Now you are in a channel that markets and inspires you. Now we are in a channel that serves you. As a customer or as an online user, you shouldn't feel those changes, right? You shouldn't feel that transition. One example that I can give you that you may be familiar with is when you go, say, to an Apple store, and you realize that to speak to people that can help you to service your devices, you need to book an appointment. So what you can do actually in the store, you can take out your phone with help from a store employee. They can help you to book an appointment on the spot, right? So you fill in a thing in the app that they have for the store, you get a notification, you click on the thing, and then they call your name within 10 minutes. Behind the scenes, there's probably a dozen systems talking to each other, right? Behind the scenes. But you, as a store visitor, you don't notice this. And that's an example of how to achieve that. So as an organization, as a company, the effort it takes to create that backend, to create this seamless experience is massive. And I'm going to share a little bit of what that actually looks like in our case. Now, organizationally speaking, missions like this, in our case, as a retailer in China, what we wanted to do is to become a truly omni-channel business. For many other organizations that come into China, your vision, your reason to be in China may be something else, right? But the first thing that I want to acknowledge in our case is that omnichannel for us require change, right? And building things for channel requires organizational change too. But let's explore a little bit. What is this change about? For us, it came to a few things. The first one was to set a clear direction, right? Like, how do we want to win here? It came to having a very strict vision for this market and a very stubborn vision. How we get there, we can be a bit more flexible, but it started with that, setting a clear direction. Where do we want to get? The second one was to define maturity goals. So as we execute on this strategy for this market, how do we know if we're making progress, right? Which parts do we need to accelerate? Because of course you cannot do everything at once. So it was about choosing your battles, right? Now that we know how do we want to win here, how do we get there, as I said, right? And maturity goals are important. Your maturity goals may be related to how mature is your technical infrastructure, or how mature is parts of your staff, maybe in certain competence that you need to develop, right? So these maturity trackers are very important for this. The third one, especially for companies that have been around for a long time outside of China, was to have a hard look at what's no longer necessary. So what do we need to leave behind to be successful here? So what that means, for example, for us in our case, we needed to leave behind, quote unquote, a lot of our technical platforms because they could simply not be integrated into the China context, right? In a way, the maturity of, say, payment platforms, or the maturity of the technical architecture, how to integrate things into the cloud, and how to store data within the country and things like that. That means that there's a lot of things that we needed to reconfigure and rebuild so that we are compliant, but that also at the same time we can operate in this market. And that basically meant, so what do we need to stop doing? And in consequence, what do we need to build from zero? So once you have a vision, once you have these maturity goals, once you know what you should do, you should not do, what are you left with? You're left with a lot of gaps. You realize that, as I said at the beginning, maybe you are under-equipped to do a lot of this. So it's about addressing these gaps, right? In what areas are we unequipped? And what is our strategy for that? Do we acquire teams? Do we hire people? Do we hire people one by one? Do we hire entire teams? Do we partner, with suppliers, with vendors, with other companies? A lot of that I know is a bit vague right now, but your mix will vary, right, depending on that. And of course, probably one of the most important things is to install radical collaboration models, right? So how should we work with each other, especially maybe if you're an MNC that is trying to set up a hub here, or set up a new satellite office, or to just really work with your China team. Understanding also what does collaboration actually look like. That may be something very important to keep in mind. Yeah. And then last but not least, having a company-wide learning system. So as you do all these things, how do you make sure that you're documenting what you're learning? Because there's so many maybe new people you're bringing in, and there's so many things happening in parallel. Having a very transparent, centralized, aggregated view of what you're learning is very important. Because we had a saying that if it's not written, it didn't happen, right? And that was in our case. In the case of IKEA, is because this was the first digital hub that we built globally. Now we have many, right? Now we have one in Amsterdam, we have one in Malmo, we have one in Madrid, we have one in the US, we have one in India. But the China digital hub was the first one. And at some point, it was the biggest one, actually. So it was important for us to be documenting what are we learning, because a lot of this can become a blueprint to operate in other markets, a lot of it. At the same time, a lot of things that you do in China will not work outside. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Yeah, so what I'll do now is I'll give you a glimpse of how we organize ourselves. I cannot share in detail what exactly our OKRs were on the first year. But they basically cover things around, increasing accessibility through online surface, right? So how do we enlarge that online surface and become more accessible in China? We had an OKR about modernizing performance of our stores. We had one around taking key steps towards becoming an omni-channel business. And then we have one about internalizing digital capability. Yeah, so those were 4 objectives, and we were very, very focused on those. And what that means is that every every meeting that we had, every partner that we met, every project we started, every new product we wanted to experiment with, it needed to be connected to one of these objectives, right? Because if it's not directly connected to one of these four areas, then that's a meeting we didn't have, that's a vendor or a partner we didn't meet, that's a project we didn't start, that's a product we didn't build. So focus is very important. And as I said, having this very stubborn vision that will just help you to know, stick to this. This is what's going to help us. Of course, you may be able to revisit how you get there, but it's very important. Almost like when you take a car, a taxi or a Didi or an Uber, right? It almost doesn't matter how well equipped the vehicle is or how professional the driver is if your pin is not in the right destination. You know, you put the pin in the wrong place. It doesn't matter what car you take, doesn't matter, nothing matters, right? You go to the wrong place. So having this clear destination is important. So the result of a lot of this in our case was helpful, right? So really, so some of the things that we were able to build in a relatively short period of time was, for example, a localized app that connected, all Chinese customers with our products and services through one central digital touchpoint. We built some instant tools on WeChat that basically you don't need to download. If you have WeChat, in China, everybody does. So if you have WeChat, you have access to these tools instantly. And we use this for, to enhance the shopping experience, but we also build things to, enjoy our food, for example, in our restaurants. We also had a chance to build from zero very interesting planners that use different kinds of algorithms or parts of machine learning to train an engine that basically automates parts of the design process so that we reduce the number of options we put in front of you. Now, these may not sound like a breakthrough, but the key difference in this market when it comes to home furnishing is that, particularly here in China, there's not a big culture of, I would say, DIY, right? The DIY, the idea of doing things yourself, which is a key differentiator for IKEA in many other markets. There are some markets like China where people expect a higher level of guidance to the decisions that they make, to the actions that they take, right? And that may include, guide me a bit more in what should I explore, guide me a bit more in like whether this is the right product for me, and guide me a bit more in how to assemble this, or maybe do it for me. Yeah, so that's some of the dynamics and dimensions we see. For those reasons, some of the existing tools that we had didn't quite work here. Right? We have a nice, beautiful, big touch screen with a tool that works everywhere, but here it didn't work quite well. So we needed to rethink how do we approach this problem, because the same problem happens in, say, in two different markets. The problem of I need to improve how I organize my home, right? Maybe I need a wardrobe. Okay, so that problem exists in two markets, but what you build and deploy as a solution for that can be very different, right? In our case here, we had to build a lot of tools that are a bit more, I would say, almost conversational. So we get a picture of what are the customer needs, and then we use AI to render solutions for them. And I'll show you a bit more as we go. We're lucky to be in a market like China. To be honest, it's a market that is very receptive to new things, to new format, to new experiences. Classic example in China, say, of a bike, the sharing bicycles, right? Like Mobike, which is no longer around as a brand, was acquired. But when Mobike came out, I would say their first generation of bikes wasn't the best. They were bulky, they were heavy, they were uncomfortable. But you could tell there were certain business decisions that were reflected in that product that was in the street, right? They were built for durability. Maybe that was one of the first hypotheses. How do we make this durable so that it eventually helps to come to profit, right? The second generation, I think, started to go more towards like, scalability, manufacturing more, right? So you could tell it was less heavy. Now there were pieces that the material was different. And the reason why I mentioned this is because in China, you see these everywhere, right? You see these iterations of different businesses trying new things everywhere. And the market is quite receptive of these things. It's not like maybe in other markets where, as a customer, you expect a hyper-polished final version of something to be given to you. Here, people is very receptive to try things out, especially when they are fans of brands. They will go along the journey with you. You launch something new, it's a bit, quite not super like straightforward, it's a bit flimsy. If people love your brands, like, okay, great, I'll try this. And if it works, great, I love it. And if it doesn't work, it's okay. I still like you as a brand, right? So it's quite interesting to be part of that movement here. And we've had a chance to do experiments like that, right? We open a small format store. We're constantly trying to figure out, so where else do we see intention and interest in the market, and how do we respond to that? And of course, we've done a lot of small to big changes in some of our portfolio, from loyalty to some of the tools that we had to build from zero. If you want one example of how we build for China, this is a before and after. This is a tool that is unique to this market. And we didn't know it needed to be a tool until we realized there's actually a very strong use case and a strong business case actually for digitizing a specific part of our service, which was just a conversation we would have with customers to provide them a quotation on a kitchen design. So we already have a IKEA design, which is a set of services that help you with soft decoration and maybe kitchen installations and so on. We've had that for a long time. But what we realized, a very common interaction was people just curious. It's like, oh yeah, I just, based on this, what's the rough estimate? And that would be a slightly challenging process for our store staff, because we didn't have a tool that automates a quotation in this case. So to get there, of course, once we realize there's an opportunity there, what you do is you literally go talk to people, right? You cannot just assume that you have an idea you can build it. In China, you need to do your research. You need to interview customers. You need to interview your staff. You need to conduct certain high-scale service, large-scale service. And with all these inputs, then you can have some sort of blueprint, some sort of strategy, some sort of guidance that will tell you, well, this is the MVP we need to build. And then you build something, then you launch it, then you test it, then you iterate on it, and so on. And we've done this across everything, right? We've done this with literally everything. Now, there's a lot of things that we have learned, but I want to very quickly share 3 things that we have found very helpful and important to win in this market. The first one is to create an organizational culture that is constantly exploring and delivering, right? So maintaining a good balance of what do I need to launch and what do I need to experiment with, right? This is super important. And what that means, as I said, is that you need to be curious for this market. You need to adopt a test to learn approach. You need to constantly find inspiration from outside. You need to be agile. You need to be fast and accountable. You need to quantify quality, right? That quality is very important for this market. This is a terrible misconception that for many years the world had, right? That things from China are low quality. There's a crazy effort to quantify the quality of everything that companies do here. I would say even more intentional than what I've seen in some parts of the West within certain industries and categories, right? And the last one, continuous iteration. So nothing is ever finished, it's only iterated. Yeah, and that shows up in a lot of things that we've done. The most recent, I would say, physical example that you have in Shanghai, if you're based here, is the store that we renovated in Zhujiahui. It's a beautiful store. It's the first store that we opened in China. And we renovated entirely the experience, right? So now the product ranges and the experience of the store is presented in a completely different way. One example is that for the first time, we removed the steered flow. The steered flow is, sometimes commonly known as the snake, is basically that path that you follow inside IKEA. There are some shortcuts here and there, right? In this store, we designed the store without that. So we launched the store originally without that. Now there's more guidance, there's a bit more steering, and I'll tell you why. So for many years, customers, maybe jokingly, maybe in a serious way, have been asking us to remove the steer flow. And so we did it. But now that we did it, they were like, oh, but you need to tell me where to go. I don't know where to go. So the store that was originally designed as a city grid created some other challenges. And we only knew this because we did it, right? We launched it. Now let's open and see what happens. So for the first time now, we needed to think about navigation. We never needed this really before. Eventually, you find the section in the store that you need and you want. So that was quite interesting. Another area that we explore is, so how do we give people more reasons to come to the store and to stay in the store, right? And in China, for example, it's quite important to build communities. How do you build a community of fans around certain activities that may relate to your brand? And there's endless examples of communities being built, right? If you look, say, for example, at Neo, there's an immense amount of people that are part of the Neo community that go to car launches, that meet up in the stores, that host events there. And many of them don't have a Neo car. Many of them don't know how to drive, but they love the brand. They love what the brand stands for. And they love meeting other people like them in this context. So communities were quite intriguing to us and important. And we've done small versions of that here and there, but of course we needed to understand how to do a version that works for us and for this market. Then again, research, prototype, figure it out. And that's what we did, right? And it worked very well. We ended up building our own platform to book events and buy tickets if the event needs a payment fee and stuff like that. And we experimented with people from the community being able to host, basically as an individual, as a citizen. You can come to IKEA, propose what type of event or gathering you want to have, and then we help curate and manage some of that, and then you can bring your existing communities into our different hubs inside the stores, right? It's still an iterating process. So what you're seeing now may look different now, which is okay, because as I said, continuous iteration is very important. And we've done this everywhere, really. We've done this with everything. We've done this with how you shop, right? Where you no longer need to maybe carry a yellow bag all the time. You have now an additional option to maybe use your mobile phone. You don't need to carry your products around. Now you have an additional option to just pick them up at the end of your visit. And as I said, I think the important thing is to keep an eye on like what's different about this market, and how do I truly understand it so I can change and I can do what really works for this place. I'm going to give you just one last example. In China, when you check out, when you're shopping online, it's very natural that people have a shopping cart with 10, 12, 15 items. And you're never forced to check out everything at once. You can always have that one last step where okay, I want to pay for this, and for this today. And then you check out individual items. That concept alone was completely foreign to a lot of companies. In e-commerce, there's a checkout button, you click, and then you buy the 20 things that you have there. But here, no. A lot of people use shopping carts as storage, right? Or as a shopping list. Doesn't mean that they want everything now. Like, oh, I just want these 3 things today. So understanding that and understanding why allowed us to put the right message, to put the right function, put the right UX, and of course to build with the whole engineering, product, and security and privacy type of crews that we have. Right? But it all started with understanding why this is happening, right? So anyway, so that's the first big lesson, right? Solving the right problem with this culture of continuous exploration and delivery. The second one has to do with data, and there's a lot of fascination for the scale of this place. How many people, how many interactions, market size, everything is a giant number. But how companies use data is almost funny sometimes. I used to joke that a lot of companies, to be transparent, when I joined the Digital Hub, I joined very early. And at that time, I noticed we were looking at data as a police report. Done. But I was interested in how do we shift and look at data as a detective story, right? So where do we find the why this is happening? To me, it's not enough. I feel like a decision that I make around data is not a high quality decision unless I go, but why is this happening, right? And I'll tell you a short story about being wrong. So we have data that told us that this tool, this touchscreen in the stores where you can design a wardrobe, data was telling us a lot of people spend a lot of time customizing the wardrobes, And because of this data, we think customization is very important. So we should invest in customization features in this tool. And we did. Lots of engineering hours, lots of design, product, everything hours into getting the algorithm to really help you and give you this ultimate freedom to style and customize things. It was only when we managed to assemble a small research team and we did qualitative research, we shadowed customers, we sat down with them, we spoke with them. We realized the reason why many of these customers spend so much time customizing is because they were losing control over the budget. Our algorithm did not necessarily prioritize keeping the price deviation within certain limits, right? So the moment I change maybe the material, it's like, oh, oops, that went 200 renminbi above my budget. And then I click something, oh, that went too low, oh, okay, oh, that went high again. And that's why people kept clicking. Once we knew this, we had to revert a lot of those decisions. We had to move from having a tool that gives you freedom of customization to create a tool or to modify the tool and the algorithm so that it helps you control your price, right? So the price deviation is now controlled basically in all these behind the scenes in a way. And that led us to where we are with the tool, right? A lot of these wardrobes that you're seeing on your screen were designed by customers, not by us in a way, right? They're quite interesting. They're quite nice. They're quite beautiful. Some are quite creative. People like choose maybe one door needs to be specific, different color. It's quite artsy, and we were fascinated by this. And of course, our engine learns from this, and we learn what's the taste of the local market, but not necessarily just at the country level, but sometimes at the store level. What seems to be the taste profile of maybe customers at this store level. Once again, we do all of this in-house and we document everything. We do partner with some external friends every now and then when we need some additional support. But the reason I mention this is because you need to be constantly curious about what you do here. You can't just have one win and just keep going and scale that. You need to be constantly blending research, data, and intuition. And then the last one, just quite a big important learning for us in the context of retail, is to have an orchestrated way or a better way or a new way to guide customers across channel. When you come to China, there's no longer a separation between online and offline, right? That's not how people think. Like if you're at home, you don't think about going into the power of the grid to boil water in your kettle to make a cup of coffee. Right? You don't think that way. You just make coffee. People don't think, oh, I'm gonna go on online dating. People just go on dates, right? So how people think about, say, in this case, in the context of retail, in our case, people just go shopping, right? They have a hard time separating online and offline, but companies love separating that. And sometimes you have to, right? Because you need to strategize on that. In our case, we have to have that grid view, that behind the scenes view of online channels and in store. And we have to have a clear strategy for how do we recognize that this is the same customer moving along these channels, and how do we understand these unique journeys, right? It's almost like a fingerprint. Every customer is unique, every customer is different. And then how do we strategize around that? Just to keep it short, our overall thinking behind omnichannel is to simply make sure that each channel does things really well. So our stores, our website, our app, our WeChat mini programs, all these touch points, all these channels need to just be amazing. And they need to, bring in new users, and they need to try and generate an omnichannel user, right? For example, the store asks you to download the app, but it doesn't just ask you to download the app. Maybe we give you a great reason to download the app. For example, if you choose to send your articles home via delivery, right, where is a parcel or a truck, the app is where you can track, where this thing is. So there's a value exchange there. There's something interesting, important, and necessary for my experience with the brand. I'll get the app. So that's how maybe a new user or a new customer in the store has now generated an omnichannel user, which is simply a blended type of user. And that's it right now. Very quickly, the last few minutes, going back to the topic of today. Where does the past come in play? Because everything that I've been mentioning now is new, right? It's new. So at some point, when everything is new, everything that is new usually meets resistance, right? Everything that is new is a surprise. And to be honest, most people don't like surprises. And this works the same for companies. So this is where we found an interesting way to use our past to create our future. And as I said, to win our future in China. So there's a philosophy, there's a methodology on how we build the products that we put in front of our customers. And this methodology or philosophy considers 5 different dimensions. So this is what we use to design physical products. We consider their form, their function, we consider their quality, how sustainable the development of these products are, and how do we maintain a low price. So these 5 dimensions is what we call democratic design. And this has been around for decades. So every IKEA designer, when they design the chair I'm sitting on, the lamp I have next to me, the desk that I'm using, the shelf behind me, I'm a big IKEA fan. Each time these products are developed, they are developed with this philosophy in mind. So that was an opportunity for us because, as I said at the beginning, we were the new kids, right? Shiny laptops, new business cards, but we were completely new to the organization. Maybe we knew China, but we didn't know the organization. So that's actually an asset and a disadvantage in a way at the same time. So how do we navigate that? So we find common ground, right? We find common ground. What can we create in common between our past and what we need to build? So what we, in an attempt to do this, what we did is modernizing these dimensions of democratic design to make them compatible with, I would say, an innovation, digital innovation world. So all these dimensions on the left were kind of repurposed into the ones you see on the right. For example, say the quality of a physical product translates into the quality of the experience. And if I go very practical, what that means is that things need to be usable, right? A good quality experience means that, oh, this is very useful. This is easy to use. This is desirable. This is, all these things. And what I'll do, I'll give you maybe 2 examples. I'll choose maybe, say, practical. Yeah, practical, the first dimension, and then I'm going to choose maybe sustainable, the other one. So practical for us means we need to design to help people to get things done seamlessly. If I want to be more specific, we want to help Chinese customers to have that convenience that they are used to. Yeah. And in our case, one example of how we think about this and what we launched, and this is a very old version, by the way, it looks much, much nicer, works much better now. One example is suggesting the perfect product match. So if you're looking at this Landskrona sofa, for example, if you scroll down a little bit, you see this combination, right? This bundle, these product recommendations. Now, the recommendations that I will get as a user are different from the ones that you will get, and different from the ones that Paul will get, right? So these recommendations are looking into things like our purchase history, what are the things that we seem to be interested in based on what we search, what's maybe like an abstracted taste profile that we seem to have. And all of this information, of course, is used to then put things in front of you that may be more relevant. And the goal really is to be more practical. The goal is to make it easier for you to continue to explore home furnishing, to acquire more knowledge, and to get excited about it. So that's one example of how we use a democratic design principle that is decades old, repurpose it, right? So we go from something very functional into something very practical in the digital world, and then we build things with that philosophy in mind. I'm going to give you one last example, which is on accessibility, sustainability, right? Sustainability for us is about designing in a way that encourages people to make better choices for them and for the planet. It sounds very big, but bear with me. This is an old version. Once again, I cannot put the most newest ones in this document, but we wanted to encourage people to choose a greener delivery option. So of course, we needed to treat the messaging, we needed to treat the UX in an interesting and appealing way, because maybe the delivery option that we wanted people to choose wasn't necessarily more expensive, but it would take longer. And the reason why it would take longer is because it was an electric vehicle. So about 95, if I'm not mistaken, % of our deliveries in China now happen with electric vehicles. And of course, you can attribute all of that to this that you're seeing on the screen, but this is one of dozens of movements in parallel that are helping us to reach that target, right, that we have for ourselves. So encouraging people to choose a greener delivery option was very important. Another thing that we do very practical digital is that we design for low battery use. So not everybody has the latest phone, right? The latest technology. Some people may have a phone that is 6, 7, 8 years old, and our app works in those phones. In fact, it's very small. It's like 130 megabytes. So if you make a video of me talking right now for like a minute, that video is going to be heavier than the app that you download. And we only store about 7 megabytes on your phone. So even if you are saturated, if you have tons of photos of your family or tons of selfies, and suddenly you have no space on your phone, there's still space for what we do, because everything is highly optimized. So those are the 5 dimensions that we have modernized. And this is an example of how we brought that past to help us innovate. It's about looking at your past. What is the vision that you have? What are the values of the organization? And how do you modernize and bring those to help you win here? Quick summary there. 4 things that are important to win here. Solve the right problem, use intuition and data to guide people, and find your past. Find a version that works for you. In our case, it was democratic design. In your case, maybe something else. And with that, I thank you. And now I see Paul again.
We'll clap for everyone. That was fantastic, Momo. Really insightful. Just for people that joined, it seemed like there were a few people that joined a little bit later. If you have any questions, again, we're all very familiar with Zoom. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box, and then I could ask them for Momo. Momo, let me just sort of kick it off, okay? You talk a lot about democratic design, right? The democratization, the input, the feedback that you get for some of your innovation that you're doing in China. What other parts of your past or what other parts
Hmm,
of your daily life do you sort of find inspiring and useful for your work that you bring in to the office?
interesting. Thank you for that. So as I mentioned, I think what's important is to remember that a lot of companies don't want to lose their identity when they enter China, right? Um, Particularly brands, I guess branding agencies will know this very well. Like companies don't want to be something else; they want to be themselves, but they want to be relevant and meaningful for this market. And to mitigate that fear, right? Because innovation is scary for companies, really. Like once you figure out how to operate and how to maintain a healthy, top line, bottom line, then why should I do anything different? And China demands you. China forces you to try something different. So the reason why I think it's important to look at the past and other examples we have is say, in our case, we were a bit late in the online game, to be completely honest. And part of it was because we wanted to take our time to really understand how to do it in a way that works for us as a brand. Right? We didn't just want to do what everybody else was doing. We wanted to really understand the market and approach it in a more thoughtful way. For example, when we wanted to say operate on Tmall or WeChat, right, this kind of third-party marketplace, was a bit scary for us because we've never done it. I imagine if I would have a meeting where maybe I pitch to the executive team, there's 100,000 new brands every month coming into online e-commerce and live streaming, we should do the same. That was probably going to be a very short meeting, right? But how we approached that was talking about accessibility, because accessibility is a core value of who we are, it's part of our identity, right? In any IKEA store in the world, if you walk inside the store, the first thing that you see is the toilet, literally within eyesight from the door. And that's one of the mandatories of how we design and build stores. And that is done because in other countries, you have to drive 1 hour, 1 hour and a half to get to the store. So the first thing that you need is usually, you need a bio break, you need a toilet. And that's the reason why every store in every city, in every market, in every country has toilets next to the door. Now, that's because we want to be accessible. Our prices, right, speak the same language. The simplicity of how we design things speaks the same language. So by using accessibility, right, then we can approach the conversation and be like, hey, if we want to be accessible for Chinese customers, we need to be where they are. And they are shopping in these places. So to be true to our values of accessibility, we need to find a way to experiment and be in these places. So suddenly you're using your past to, in a way, protect your innovation initiative, right?
Yep.
In a way, you defend a little bit the newness of something that feels threatening. It's like, oh no, but once you, I don't want to say coated, but once you speak that language that is more familiar to the organization as a whole, not to like the person, the decision maker, but the organization, you get everybody excited, right? Everybody seems that they have some sort of understanding of what to do or why we need to do this, right? And then the rest of the conversation and the process becomes a bit easier. And every company can benefit from this, right? So if you just look back at the archives from any company 10, 20, 30 years ago, a lot of them had the right vision, they had the right idea. They just forget, you know what I mean? They forget over time. And I think that's a bad thing to do in China. You shouldn't forget who you are and where you come from, but you need to be able to adapt and use that same past to modernize yourself here. Yeah.
Okay. No, that's great. You talk a lot about, omni-channel, understanding
Mm.
customers across different touch points. I know a lot of the times in academic sort of settings, it's really good in theory, right? The
Yeah.
practicality of it is sometimes harder, right? To be able to collect the data if you're in a third-party
Yeah.
platform like Facebook,
That's
like
right.
WeChat, like Alibaba. Sometimes you don't have access to that data. As
Yeah.
you're on the client side, so you do have access. What are some of the lessons you've
Right.
learned through that whole process
Yeah.
throughout your time there?
Yeah. That's for that. Thanks for that question. There's a lot to unpack there. And to be honest, I may not have the level of knowledge necessary to give you a clear picture of that from what I see and from what I've experienced. What you mentioned, yes, it's completely true. The challenges of uh, maybe having customer data that is helpful for the business,
Yeah.
right? Especially if you operate third-party marketplaces like Tmall or WeChat, right? Where, of course, because of their own policies and everything, that data is contained within that ecosystem. And that's why a lot of organizations, a lot of companies, retailers in general, try to use loyalty programs as a mechanism to migrate these users
Yeah.
into their own ecosystem, right? So maybe a new user or a new customer signs up or buys something in a third-party channel, you incentivize them to maybe enroll into a loyalty program by maybe offering a first repurchase coupon, whatever that may be. But then once they enroll, then now they have officially and consensually become part of your ecosystem. And I think then targeting becomes a bit easier, if you want to bring them to your ecosystem. And to be honest, everybody has tried different versions of that. Like all retailers that I know from the top of my head have tried that. I think what that tells me is that there is more intention to really try and understand customers and bring them into a place where you can actually continuously meet them in better ways. I think at the end of the day, maybe what Tmall, what WeChat, as marketplaces and what companies are trying to do is the same. It's just that how they do it is different. But what I like from the distance is that intention. Everybody wants to understand customers better, to serve them better, right? Of course, you can take the angles like, oh, you want more customer data to make more money out of customers. You can always see it from any angle, or from how I see it. There's an intention and there's a curiosity to understand people, and then organize ourselves, around that, right? And there's been a lot of challenges, of course, to do that. I think some of the lessons that we had once we managed to have this kind of clear omnichannel view is things like decision windows are very long, actually. So basically, to make a big purchase decision, people need a lot more time than the time they spend in a physical store. And often that's the reason why they come back, right? They come back one time, two times, three times, and then they buy. That's because during that tail, they're figuring things out. They're gathering information, right? They're doing a lot of things. So what we're trying to do, we're trying to shorten that by identifying what are the elements that add or build up that confidence, that rational confidence, that emotional belief, in the solution or the product. So how do we understand those needs, aspirations, and how do we bring that back? Data is giving us a better idea of where to do that, for example. So rather than maybe, having a purchase window of like 20, 30 days to buy a wardrobe, now that decision window may be 10 days, right? And that's one, I guess, one example of some of the many things we're doing. Another example, say, maybe just related to value exchange. At what point does it make sense for a customer to be willing to scan a QR code to open a mini program? Where maybe, say, you scan a parking lot QR code to remember where you left your car, or maybe at the end of the journey you scan, because if you're a customer, you don't need to pay a parking fee, for example. But then those interactions are timestamped, are connected to your IKEA account. So now we know when did you come to the store and what time did you leave. And because we don't really have customer tracking, we don't have facial recognition, we don't have customer following inside the store. We don't know, actually. It's a little bit of a mystery sometimes. But now that at least we have these indicators of when did you come in, when did you leave, when did you leave, and maybe what did you buy on that thing, that gives us a richer view, right? That in the past we didn't really have. So it's also about knowing how to listen in digital ways, I guess, through these different touch points, but in a very thoughtful way, as I said, right? If you walk into a place with 100 QR codes, nothing happens. But if you put the right thing at the right time, rather than just in case, then you get to interesting stuff.
I want to sort of move to this word around innovation, right? A lot of companies talk about it. A lot of people talk about it, right? A lot of experts. Yeah. Can you tell me just a little bit, and it'd be really good if you get granular, right? Like, do you guys do sprints? Do sprints last for 1 week? Like, do you, a lot of, I know I've consulted on companies and they do innovation workshops, but they only do it once a year in a hotel, off-site. They bring in all the leaders, right? And to me, it feels like innovation is not just one day out of a year. It's a culture. It's part of the DNA. Can you talk a little bit about how IKEA approaches innovation, and how it's embedded within your organization?
Yeah, exactly. Sure. So I think innovation is everybody's responsibility at IKEA. So innovation is not an activity, right? Innovation is not a meeting or a workshop. I think innovation is how we think and approach problems and the solutions for them, right? So for example, on the digital side, on product development, we work on Agile. So every 3 weeks, there's something new, right? So if you download the app today, in 3 weeks, there's something new there. And you may notice, actually, there's an update every 3 weeks on the App Store, right? And that happens across a portfolio of about 11 products, 11 digital products we built here.
Yeah.
So they were constantly running experiments. There's not a single week where there's not at least 5 experiments running in parallel. So I think, I mean, to me, innovation is about that. Is about iterating and understanding what's taking place in your user base, what are the interactions you're seeing, and how do you make better decisions based on that, right? Of course, there are sessions that are important where you bring leaders, as you say, you bring leaders into a room, and then you facilitate sessions that may create alignment, that may create a shared vision, that may accelerate certain timelines that you need to accelerate. Or that, to be honest, may just lead to people working better together. So we've had initiatives, it's quite common in big companies to create task forces. Basically, you scout the organization, and then you gently hijack some people from their roles, and then you put together a virtual team. You give them an assignment or a mission, some targets, or maybe they define themselves what targets may be. Yeah. And then they work on this, say, 20% of the time, right? So maybe 1 day a week or half a day per week for 2 months. It's a projectized approach. There's a fixed timeline, fixed scope, maybe some fixed budget to support that work. And you do that because I think what's important is that you identify different parts of the organization that may need more stimulation to work better together, right? There may be always, the classic in the agency world is production versus creative. Maybe in the digital world is marketing versus product development, or I don't know, sales versus consumer insights. There's always a tension there, and that's fine. But I think the goal of these innovation projects is to help people to understand each other better and to bring drastically different perspectives into a business challenge, right? Or a business opportunity that you see. Because I think at the end of the day, the short version is also that innovation benefits from this diversity of thought. When you innovate for each other, when you have all your creative team innovating, that's not innovation. It happens when you get the creative, the production, and the accounts team together in the room. That's when you get to more interesting places. And a lot of people may not like hearing that. In the brand world, the brand side is the same, right? When you only get your innovation team to innovate, you don't get too far. You need to involve everybody. You need to involve business transformation and development. You need to involve sustainability teams. You need to involve the commercial teams, marketing, digital, product, and so on. That's when you get to super interesting perspectives. Just on the digital side, one example. Some of the best ideas that I've heard about improving certain things come from back-end engineers, people that build the code that supports the infrastructure of the thing. Yeah. So you would assume they're very detached from the user-facing or consumer-facing interface. But because they see the X-ray view of what's broken, they see those opportunities, right? So paying attention to the quietest voices in the room sometimes is what helps. Yeah.
That's great. One person asked the question around, just to tag on to this innovation topic, how do you disseminate that then globally, right? You talked about China being the first to launch digital hub. Is there a specific process in terms of sharing with different markets, let's say in either Europe, North America,
right?
I'm sharing to you. How does that sort of process work within IKEA?
Yeah, so I think what we found helpful is to kind of map structurally how are we set up in the digital hub here in China versus how the global organization is set up, and then map the similarities between these functions or teams, because then that creates that common ground where they can exchange and share with each other. So we will have a global loyalty team, and we have a local China IKEA family loyalty team. Then we connect them, right? So we're sharing learnings, we're sharing results of new experiments we're running. They're sharing their vision, the experiments they're trying in new markets. So as long as you map almost one-to-one, at a team or a function level, people will naturally want to share things with each other. And if we manage to maybe centralize insights or provide some sort of templates for more formal type of communication, that helps everybody stay in the loop and contribute. Yeah.
Awesome. I'm going to answer one more question from the audience, and then I'm going to follow up with my student. We were all stuck in a pandemic, right? Over the last few years, people couldn't go physical. IKEA's in, really a hands-on experience, a retail experience. What did you learn through the pandemic? Any sort of key nuggets there that you've sort of brought into and brought back and integrated?
Very interesting, huge question. If I kindly ask people if they're interested, so there's something called the Life at Home report. You can look for it online. It's officially published by IKEA every year. So we visit thousands of homes. We do thousands of qualitative and quantitative research, and then all these insights are shared with everybody. We make that knowledge available to everyone because I think not only us can contribute to a better life at home, but a bunch of other places. Specifically in China, what we learn is like there's a much higher need for privacy. I think people realize the importance of privacy at home, right? The independent spaces for themselves, from roommates or maybe within your own family. How do you have your little safety corner nook, right? For work, for reading, for relaxing. So that was one key finding on how do we maybe then show our range in a way that can divide spaces, maybe. So this bookshelf doesn't go against the wall. Now it can divide the room. Now you can have two spaces in the same room, for example. Another thing that came out was also the sudden realization that you need to maybe update your furniture. People never really maybe paid attention to how old their sofa was until they needed to be in the sofa for like 2 months in a row. So I think the pandemic also increase that awareness that life at home is so important because it's our safe space, right? It's the one thing that we see every day, no matter what, right? So your day at work could look different every day. Your commute may look different every day, but your home is that constant presence of things that you care about, and I think that concept became more clear, more obvious to customers. So there's a lot more curiosity for content inspiration. So we have put a lot more effort into inspire people. I don't want to say educate, but inspire people to get curious and to become more knowledgeable, I think, on home furnishing and what to live better. Yeah, so that accelerated after the pandemic. Thank you, Paul. Good question.
Okay. We have a lot of students on the line, either here in Shanghai or in New York. We have, professors that are also watching today and obviously teach students. Can you, I want to end it off with this. How, what skills do you look for now in sort of when you do recruitment, when you're looking for people that are graduating, people that are probably just starting their school life? What should they focus on? What is it that you're looking for in terms of just, when you meet someone, when you get a CV? Can you talk a little bit about that in terms of what skills you're looking for, what skills students should be focusing on?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So my personal take, I don't know if I can represent the philosophy of how we hire IKEA, but my personal take for the type of work that we do is that I seek for two things. I seek for, I guess, curiosity, an extreme curiosity to find answers. And this is typically people that come with a lot of questions rather than people that may show up as, incredibly knowledgeable and having all the answers and having everything line by line rehearsed. I like people that ask strong, complex questions because that muscle is very important for your everyday work. Because on your everyday work, you're not really reciting anything. On your everyday work, you're just asking things and trying to find out. That's one thing I look for. The second one, I try to understand how do they make decisions when they are under stress, maybe. Not because I think working in general is stressful or working at IKEA is stressful. It's just because that's often when your body, I guess, when your brain reacts in interesting ways. So how do people make decisions at pivotal moments of their career, for example? How do people make decisions when they're under stress? Or how do people make decisions when there's a conflicting point of view in the room? That to me is important, and that's a muscle that students already have because they very often have to deal with that, either student projects, maybe in their personal life at home, or some internship or professional experience they've had, right? So I think those two things are important, right? Like extreme curiosity and the ability to articulate how do they think or how do they make decisions in these situations. And to be honest, organizationally speaking, the best way to accelerate your innovation muscles is to bring in young people into the company, right? Especially for companies where a lot of our staff, they're incredibly smart, they're very passionate. It is crazy the amount of passion and interest they have into the job, even though they've been at IKEA for sometimes 20, 30 years. They love the brand. They know everything about it. And I promise you, they're incredibly committed and engaged. And I love that. But at the same time, it's very helpful to bring completely new energy because then those two extremes is what supports each other in a way, right? So these two archetypes of employees, of course, they may be building with different degrees of wisdom, right? But also different levels of energy and curiosity. So it's good to stimulate, it's good to create a mix. So we have a very young team in general at the Digital Hub, for example, and we intentionally looked into that for that reason. We wanted that raw curiosity, energy, and bravery that comes with it. So yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. Really, really good. I always ask this question to a lot of our guests. For people that join late, if you want to see some of the other answers and other our guest speakers, we have a YouTube channel where you could go to, just search NYU Lessons from China, and you could see how some of, the head of Shiseido, the head of e-commerce at L'Oreal have sort of answered that questions around students and skills and recruitment. Okay. Thank you very much, Momo. We've gone past our time.
Thank you,
Robin,
Paul.
Lisa, do you want to just pull up the last two slides here for people in terms of what's coming up? Again, fantastic. Thank you very much, Momo. I really personally appreciate you coming on, and I know the
Thank you for
community,
having me.
and I know the community would be very appreciative of that as well. Before
Thank you for
people
having me.
go and either start your day if you're here in China or just going to bed in New York, we have a couple of events coming up as part of the NYU community. Okay, symptoms of an effective marketing and communication team. Friday, March 3rd, from 12 to 1 p.m. So around noontime. Lunch, if you're eating lunch, you could just flip on your Zoom and stick around and learn something. It's a workshop being led by Catherine Landis, who's adjunct instructor of integrated marketing at NYU. And is there one more? And then leadership in changing times. Again, very, very much a big topic right now. The shift that's happening from pandemic to sort of regular life. All the crises that are happening around the world. We have guest speaker Elizabeth Nito, global head of equity and impact of Spotify, Thursday, March 9th, from again 12 to 1 p.m. So spend your lunch with us if you are eating alone or all that great stuff. Okay. If you enjoyed our event today, if you enjoyed myself, if you didn't like me, then hey, please let me know. Right. I'm always looking to improve. Love to sort of get your feedback. So check your emails if you signed up about what you thought from Lessons from China. Any speakers that you would want to see in the future, we would love. We'll try our best to try to get them for you. So on that note, that is it for today. Again, have a great day, have a good evening, have a good morning if you're if you're in Asia, and we thank you very much. See you next time.